friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Shailene and in today's video I'm finally bringing to you my February wrap up. If you've watched my January wrap up then you would know that these past few months of 2020 have not been the best health wise for me, so I've been struggling to film videos and get those out for you guys. I'm so sorry. We're just going to get into the books. So in February I read 11 books. 5 of those were physical, 5 of those were ebooks, 3 of them were library, and 2 of those were DNFs. I read a total of 3,467 pages and I had 91 hours of reading time. The first book that I read in February was Truly Devious, followed by The Vanishing Stair, followed by The Hand on the Wall. I read all 3 books in the Truly Devious series. I read 2 of these before. This was the new book that came out in January and I really wanted to read it because it was the end of the series. So I read all 3 books and I did a vlog on those. So that vlog should be up on my channel now. So you can go ahead and check out that reading vlog for the Truly Devious series. I also read Africville by Jeffrey Colvin. So this is a generational saga. It follows the lives of 3 different black Canadians. They reside in the town of Africville, Nova Scotia. So I actually read this for Black History Month. Africville, Nova Scotia was actually a town in Nova Scotia that had many black residents. It has a very sad history. The city of Halifax were extremely discriminatory towards the residents. There was a big dump steadily encroaching on the town, and eventually there was the destruction of the town due to the city because bulldozers came in and just destroyed it all. I didn't even know about Africville until maybe 6 or 7 years ago now. I didn't even know it was a thing. Like I'd never heard of it before. So when I saw this book, I knew that I really wanted to read it, although I thought this was going to be a non-fiction book when I picked it up, and then I realized it's a contemporary. I wasn't too mad about it because I like both genres. So yeah, reading this was kind of an eye-opener for me because I didn't know anything about Africville prior to going into this, so I did kind of get, I guess, sort of a non-official, sort of fictionalized account of how the residents came to form Africville. I really enjoyed the generational saga that followed this book. We follow, I think, 4 different characters, all of the same generation. So it was such an interesting read. I learned a lot about just, you know, Africville in general, but also these characters and the prejudice they faced, you know, at that point in time. I enjoyed a lot of the characters for the most part, although there are some things that, you know, the characters do that I don't necessarily 100% agree with, and I was kind of mad at them for, you know, doing this sort of thing or doing that sort of thing, but it made the characters feel all the more real when they, you know, make stupid decisions and do certain things that, you know, you don't 100% agree with. There are a lot of themes in this book that I, you know, as a white woman have not been really exposed to. I didn't really know about these sort of themes that they talked about, so it was quite educating in a way that a non-fiction probably would have been anyways. So yeah, it was a great pick for Black History Month for me. And I ended up really enjoying this novel. It really took me by surprise. I really liked it. And I gave it 4 stars. Next we have a nonfiction book that I read but ultimately ended up DNFing. I will talk about this book more in my next Nonfiction Fridays video. So I read 18 Tiny Deaths, The Untold Story of Francis Gressner Lee, and the Invention of Modern Forensics by Bruce Goldfarb. I actually received this as an ARC from NetGalley, but it ended up being something else that I wasn't intending on reading. So yeah, I DNF'd it around 50% and I ended up giving it 2 stars. So I'll get into my review a lot more about that later on in my next Nonfiction Fridays video. So the next book that I read was The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. So you know, it's just a little thing going on called the coronavirus right now. We're in the midst of quarantine. Lots of people are getting sick and panic buying toilet paper and all that. So yeah, reading this book about a month ago, I didn't expect to kind of be living this reality that this book kind of has at this moment. So this book is set in a small town in California at a local college. A mysterious sleeping sickness kind of begins to take hold in these students. In the beginning, the doctors don't know what this mysterious illness is. Basically, anyone who gets this here mysterious illness, they get it really fast. They sleep and sleep and sleep and just don't wake up, and while they are sleeping, they experience extremely vivid dreams. And yeah, it's just very interesting. And so this illness, it sweeps through this town and it takes down anyone in its path, no matter their age or, you know, their health status, whether they're immunocompromised or not. Soon, because this mysterious sleeping illness is sweeping through the town is on lockdown and nobody is allowed in or out. So this book actually follows many different perspectives of the characters. We're following a college student who one of her roommates actually falls sick with the illness. We're also following a young girl who her father is this here kind of survivalist guide, and her and her sister are kind of equipped to, you know, kind of carry out this here crazy illness. Then we're also following a couple with a newborn. We're also following this old man as he lives alone and cares for his partner at a home facility. We're following many different perspectives, and it's quite interesting following the perspectives of these many different people. It was very interesting to read in the age of the coronavirus, and it's definitely kind of scary. It really did kind of show how fast an illness like that can just sweep through town and take down anybody, and how long it actually takes doctors to figure out. There's a lot of chaos that happens and panic and devastation, which I'm sure all of us know way too personally now. At times this was a slow read, but the writing is just so beautiful. It is quite lyrical and dreamy. I really enjoyed the writing style. I really enjoyed the storytelling. It's a great book and one that I would recommend, but not recommend for you to read right now. Maybe read this in a year or so time because it's a little too close to home at the moment. I give this a 4 stars. So I read another arc. This one was provided by Greater Path LLC via NetGalley. I read She Died Famous by Rutkin. So I decided to read this book because the cover and the premise really drew me in. The author had a great premise for the book. It's about a Hollywood starlet who gets murdered along with her manager, and it's presumed that her ex-lover / this author was the one who holds all the clues to her death and was potentially the murderer. However, the execution for this book is horrid. It's ghastly, really. Like, the only good thing that I have to say about this book is that I liked the format in which it was told. We have a blend of blog posts, police interviews, magazine interviews, and all of those are from different perspectives. So that was an enjoyable and very highly readable format. I really like when books, you know, kind of present that format, but the formatting of this book wasn't gonna save it at all. Oh my god, this book is just a hot train wreck. So, the writing. First of all, the writing feels like it's a highly edited fanfic, not of the good kind. The writing was just clunky, it was cliche. At times it was really difficult to kind of tell whose perspective we were reading from and who they were talking about or what they were talking about. Like, it was just super confusing at times. The characters are stereotypical annoying rich brats with mental health problems and drug problems. We have Caleb. He, you know, kind of had a bit of a rough life. He's a drug addict. He becomes an author because he writes this book that's loosely, actually no, it's not loosely, it's basically based off his life. He stalked this here woman who was in an abusive relationship with her husband, and he really forces himself onto her, and somehow they become involved in a romantic relationship, and he somehow writes a book about that that's based, like, very thinly veiled to be, you know, basically his life. That was not creepy at all. And then we have Kelly, who is this huge TV pop star kind of personality. You can kind of think of somebody on the scale of like Miley Cyrus. She reads this book, becomes absolutely obsessed with it. She arranges to meet Caleb. They end up having a really weird and toxic sexual relationship. And then yeah, I mean, they both are super selfish people. They have drug and alcohol problems. And Kelly is just such an annoying character. They're both annoying. Like, Caleb is just a creepy, annoying, disgusting, like, pervy character. And then Kelly is just this annoying character who, you know, posts all this fake positivity bullcrap. And, you know, she dubs her fans as being the K-troop. It's just so cringy. She always talks about her work and her craft and how she's doing this and that and whatever, and she acts like she's the coolest person since sliced bread or whatever. Like, oh my god. It was annoying, yeah. And so they just have this really weird, abusive relationship. Caleb talks about how he wants her and then magically he gets with her and, you know, he's not on her level kind of thing. And it's just a weird relationship. Kelly is like this, you know, she's this big star. Everybody idolizes her. It's, yeah, oh god. Also, these sex scenes in this book. I hate reading about romance and I typically don't read books with sex scenes in it, so I was really not expecting to have sex scenes in this book, and I was really bummed that there was, and then they ended up just being really horrible and disgusting. You can check out my full review about this book on Goodreads. It's a garbage fire of a book. It was disgusting. Even the darn mystery was horrible. It was horrible. You could obviously see who did it. It was, yeah, no. It was awful. Quite possibly one of the worst books I read in a long time. I gave this a 2-star. So the next book I read was also another arc. This arc was provided by HQ Digital via NetGalley. So I read House of Eyes by Terry Lynn Thomas. This was the third book in the Cat Carlisle series. I have read the past 2 books in the series. Absolutely loved them. In this book we follow Cat and Charles as they are now living in Rivenby and they are engaged. Cat is currently running a shelter for battered women who are escaping their abusive husbands. She gives them a place to live. She also provides them with an education and eventually a job to get them back on their feet and living independently away from their husbands. Charles is also working at the constabulary while he's also lending his home to important artifacts so they can be out of the reach of the hands of Nazis. Basically, one of the women in Cat's refuge ends up being murdered. They suspect that it's from this here known criminal who has a large network, and that criminal happens to be this woman's husband. In comparison to the 2 under the books in the series, this one I didn't like as much as the others, sadly. I felt like the mystery was lacking a bit. I was expecting Cat to do some meddling like she did in the other books, which is just so fun. I feel now that she's, you know, tied down, she's kind of more obedient towards Thomas, which, I mean, come on girl, you're a strong, independent woman. Just be a little disobedient for the sake of adventure. She doesn't do that in this book, and it disappointed me a bit because I feel like it's not really quite the same Cat from the other books. So, yeah. Although I do really enjoy the romance between Cat and Charles. It's one of the few romances of books that I can read about that I genuinely enjoy. So yeah, the ending was great as always, super suspenseful. Terry Lynn Thomas knows how to make a good ending for a murder mystery. So yeah, it was a good story. Wasn't my favorite of the series, but if Terry Lynn Thomas does decide to write another book in the series, I will definitely be reading it. So I gave this one a 3 stars. The next book I actually listened to in audio. I listened to Sadie on audio for the first time. I actually read this book physically last year, sometime in July, I think it was. So, I mean, I already know how the story goes, but literally everybody was telling me how great the audiobook for this book was. So I put my name on a waiting list back in August, and it took until February for me to listen to this book. I was on that waiting list for forever. We are following, obviously, Sadie. She is this here girl. Her younger sister gets murdered. Police are kind of twiddling their thumbs They're not really doing much about the investigation. Sadie has a hunch and she kind of knows who did it, so she goes after the guy to try to, you know, hunt him down and I guess get her revenge. So Sadie goes missing and then we follow this guy who's making this podcast about Sadie and her disappearance to hopefully find where Sadie is and, you know, help her if she needs help. I listened to the audiobook. Okay, first of all, I read this book, I loved it. It made my favorites of 2019. I gave it a 5-star. I love this book. It's such a great, quick YA mystery, very heartbreaking. I listened to this audio and I don't think audiobooks are for me. This was my very first audiobook. I never ever listened to an audiobook prior to this. I just don't think audiobooks are for me. Some of the voices they were putting on and some of the narration they did was just kind of cringy. Sometimes when you read a book word for word out loud, you know, in an audiobook format, it comes out a little cringy, especially when you have adults who are trying to sound like a 16-year-old girl. It just doesn't really work out. Sadie's voice is very much that of somebody in her 30s. It was an unenjoyable audiobook for me, and I couldn't even listen to the rest of it. I basically just picked up this book and read the rest of it because I couldn't stand to listen to another second of it. It was horrible. If I were to have rated this book based on the audiobook alone, I would have given it a 2-star. It was painful. So I will probably never listen to another audiobook again. They're not my thing. The next book that I read was Bury the Lede by Gabby Dunn. This was an arc that was provided by Boom Studios via NetGalley. This is a graphic novel. So we are following a young reporter for this here newspaper, the Boston Lede, and she lands this here interview with this prominent woman who is suspected for the killing of her husband and her young son. But nothing is as it seems, and the story runs much deeper than Madison has ever expected. I really love the illustrations of this novel. It was a very fitting illustration because it really did lend to the whole kind of, you know, dark noir newspaper kind of vibes that it was going for. The mystery itself is quite interesting, twisty, and a bit unexpected. It's very enjoyable, but my only complaint about this is that I wish it was longer. It was so quick, it was so short, so much more could have been done, it could have been drawn out. And yeah, there is some LGBTQIA rep in this, so if you're looking for that, then this is a great read for that. So yeah, I ended up really enjoying this book and I gave it a 3.5 stars. The next book I read was Sea Witch Rising by Sara Henning. Last year, I believe it was in August, I read Sea Witch by Sara Henning. It was an okay book. It wasn't what I expected the book to be. This book, Sea Witch Rising, is what I wanted Sea Witch to be, so yeah. So in this here book, we are following Evie some 40 years later after the events that took place in the first book. This is during World War I, and she is still imprisoned in her sea cave. A young mermaid comes to her, one of the Sea King's daughter. She wishes that she could become a human after she has been stalking this prince for a year after she saved him from a shipwreck. The Sea Witch grants her her wish. Little mermaid becomes human, but she only has 4 days until true love's kiss, or else she will turn into sea foam and die. Her sister and twin Runa is worried about her sister, and so she strikes a deal with the Sea Witch. So she also gets turned into a human, and she makes a deal with the Sea Witch that if her sister doesn't have a true love's kiss, she will stay a human forever. She's there to make sure that things don't go wrong with her sister and the prince, although they end up going very wrong. So the result is a story in which Runa may have to stay a human forever, and she has to stay clear of anyone who may arrest her for murder. Soon, once she's on land though, she discovers a coven of witches who are trying to come together to stop the war from happening and also help Runa to try and become a mermaid again. So this is a much more entertaining story compared to the last book. It was much more enjoyable, much more fast-paced. There was much more ocean action going on compared to the last one. I mean, in the last book, we spent most of our time in a castle with balls and gowns and all that stuff, and that wasn't really what I was expecting the book to be. And in this one, we do spend quite a bit more time, you know, under the sea, and I really enjoyed that. Also, the romance that occurred in the previous book I did not like, but the romance that occurred in this book was a bit more tolerable. So yeah, it was a very interesting take on The Little Mermaid. It was enjoyable. It was just, you know, a fun, relaxing read, and I really liked it. So I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars. And the last book that I read in February was The Call of the Wild by Jack London. I think pretty much all of us know kind of what the story about The Call of the Wild is about. It's about a dog who becomes a sled dog in the Alaskan wilderness during the gold rush and all that kind of stuff. So some things happened in this book that I was not prepared for. There was a lot of animal abuse going on in this book, a lot of dog fighting. So if you're somebody who really can't deal with animal abuse in books, do not read this. It's kind of violent, kind of graphic, and yeah, definitely not something I was expecting. The plot is actually very boring, like incredibly boring. Thankfully this is just a short book, but yeah, there really wasn't much I enjoyed about this book at all. There's not a single thing I can say that I liked. Maybe the end is really the only thing that I enjoyed about this book. So yeah, I read this because the movie was coming out and I wanted to read the book before I saw the movie, although I haven't even seen the movie yet. So yeah, I ended up giving this a 2.5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in the month of February. If you enjoyed this video, you can go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I will leave the links to my Instagram, my Goodreads, and my Twitter in the description below, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye!